Next up, we have DeVonta Smith, the Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver out of Alabama, who has somehow turned into a pretty polarizing prospect this draft season, which I find quite interesting, right? You look into the stats, and first thing you see almost immediately is consistent and rapid progression, right? A guy who, those first 3 years was essentially just doubling his stats from the year before, right? Which is obviously as you continually get a larger and larger role in the offense, that's exactly what you want. And then obviously in 2020, what can you even say about that, right? 117 receptions, nearly 1,900 yards, and 23 touchdowns. I mean, that's just madness. And kind of off the back of that, it's sort of interesting because you would assume that people look at that and they're like, hey, he was considered the number one player in the nation. Is he the top player in the class? And it's like, oh, well, no, most people have him as the third best wide receiver. Like that's kind of mind boggling in a sense. I understand the reasons why, as we'll get into here. It's primarily surrounding his size, right? 6 foot, was listed at 6'1", 175 at Alabama. Measurements come back at right around 6 feet 170, right? Obviously, a couple people have said 166. I've heard 175, in that range. So it seems like the common sort of opinion now on Smith is all of a sudden, throw out the numbers, throw out the tape, it doesn't matter, too small. And that's interesting to me, right? Because I don't really know what that means entirely, right? I wish the people who'd say that would at least give me a full sentence, right? Like, don't just say too small, extrapolate on it and tell me what that means. Because, okay, you go to Cedar Point, right? Like, they have a clear line that if you are not taller than this, you cannot get on the ride, right? Because the seatbelt's not going to cover you. You're going flying off. And next thing you know, we have a big lawsuit, right? That's too small. What does it mean that DeVonta Smith is too small? He's playing, first and foremost, the position with the greatest size disparity of any in the league, right? We're talking about there's been Hall of Famers at the position 6'8", right? Harold Carmichael, by example. There's been Hall of Famers 5'7", right? Tommy McDonald. There's Trindon Holiday, 5'5", same position, nearly 1 foot and 3 inches difference. So too small. He seems like height wise, he's right in the middle of that, right? Weight wise, I don't know what quite the concern is. Are you saying that he's too small, therefore he's not strong enough to get off of press coverage? Okay, I mean, that might be valid, but there are ways you can work around that, right? That doesn't mean he's going to be a bust or a bum. I mean, just play him off the line of scrimmage a little bit more, play him from the slot maybe a little bit, move him around in motion. It's tough to really jam and press a guy that's on the move, right? You could do things like that. Okay. When you say too small, are you saying that he's just too short to catch passes? I don't think so. Obviously, that seems kind of ridiculous. Are you saying he's, his frame is too thin to where you're worried that he won't be able to withstand the NFL season? I mean, yeah, I get it. He weighs 170 pounds, but at the same time, I couldn't tell you his bone density, right? So I don't know what I'm talking about there. And he's 5 pounds away from having the same BMI as Robbie Anderson, who had 95 catches and over 1,000 yards last season. So it's not as though people in a similar mold aren't having success literally last season. It's not as though he's 5'1". I'm confused at what this just too small moniker means. I wish people would explain it a little bit more, because I think a lot of the reasons that they think he's too small can simply be worked around, right? And be explained a little bit. Is size a concern? Most definitely, yeah. But it's not like we're not going to let him on the ride, right? He's not going to fly off and die. It's just a concern, right? And there's concerns with everybody, right? I'm concerned that Jamar Chase only played 14 really productive games and then opted out, right? What has he done since he opted out? Is he too big after potentially spending the last year on his couch? Obviously, I'm being facetious, right? We saw the pro day numbers; he looked great, but I just don't quite get that concern to the extent that people are saying, "Oh, he's a bust." I mean, it's kind of funny because just 2 years ago, I heard DK Metcalf was too big, right? Oh, too stiff. He can't move. Well, what are we saying here? To be a good receiver, you have to be between 6'1" and 6'4", right? Like, you have to be between 200 and 205 pounds. Like, you're decreasing the bounds when I don't necessarily think that has to be the case. I mean, now DK Metcalf is a, by most people regarded as a top 10 receiver in the league, 15, 20 at the least, right? He was too big, and he was going to be a bust, and now he's great. So I don't necessarily think that we should create these hard and fast rules when sure, the average is 6 feet 200 pounds for the position, but we've seen both sides of the spectrum have success. And I mean, with that being said, he could 100% have problems in the league due to his size, right? I mean, look at a guy like Deshaun Jackson, by example, where durability is his greatest concern. But I mean, we're looking at a guy who's played 3 full seasons back to back to back. We're looking at a guy who has had nearly 4,000 yards over 4 years at Alabama, a school notoriously known for running the football. I mean, at some point, the greatest predictor for having success at football has to be, have you had success at football, right? That's why I hate the whole RAS score reliance that it seems like we're in here, where, oh, a guy like DeVonta Smith, no, he's too small. Well, I mean, you can factor it into your grade, but I don't really think that that's a realistic reason to say he shouldn't be drafted in the first round, or let alone top 15, et cetera, right? But with that being said, let's get into my grade, because he could put up these numbers and still be absolute trash. It just so happens that I don't think he is. I think that in terms of his ability to run routes, I would say between him and Chase, at least, as well as some of the guys coming up, he's the best guy, right? His ability to make you think he's running something that he's not. You know, I always talk about that. Your ability to kind of sell your opponents, right? If you're running a deep post, you want to, you know, until you actually commit to running that post, you want to make them think it's anything else. It could be a corner, it could be an out, it could be a streak, it could be anything, right? Because you're trying to get their hips out of whack. You're trying to attack them in a way that they are unsuspecting of, to get open, right? He does that, at least in my opinion, better than anybody that I've watched so far. Not to spoil future grades, but anybody that I've watched so far. In terms of speed and quickness, it doesn't get much quicker. I'll be honest. I don't really know what I want to say there. So he might be small, but he's dang pretty quick. And, you know, that kind of helps, at least in my mind, lessen those sort of durability issues, because it's very tough to get an angle on a guy who's that fast. You know, you kind of see that with Tyreek Hill. Obviously, Tyreek's a little bit more built, but somebody with his speed and athleticism, you're not going to get clean hits on very often. And, you know, if those are a problem, then maybe you just don't run him on those routes where he's just, you know, running straight on a drag into a linebacker, right? In terms of hands and consistency, again, I felt he was very solid, and it's tough for me to even really say anything about these first 3 categories, right? Because he's just so good. Does a great job of catching the ball away from his body. Maybe that's a potential benefit to having such a small chest, right? The ball's not going to be bouncing off of it, and you're going to have to catch with your hands, right? But no, in all seriousness, I mean, outside of a couple of balls in traffic, it felt like if it was a catchable pass, DeVonta was catching it, right? And with that being said, I don't really know what to say. In terms of contested catches, then, I would say that was probably his biggest weakness on film. But at the same time, he's still 6'6", right? Like, he's able to climb the ladder and make plays on the ball. He has a great vertical just based off film. Obviously, he didn't test it his pro day, but I don't really know. I don't really know if that's your worst category. I don't know why we're talking about you're too small, right? Like, you can't play. I just don't understand. Next up, in terms of tracking and body control, I mean, he was just flat out elite, right? I don't really know what to say there. Whether it was deep balls where, you know, there'd be a little bit of a shaky throw by Mac Jones, do a great job getting his head around and locating it. On sideline catches, plays in the back of the end zone, just contorting his body, did a phenomenal job there, right? And again, that might be a little bit of a upside, in all seriousness, this time, to being a little bit more thinner framed, right? Because you're able to have better control, because you don't have so much mass propelling you out of bounds, say, like some other receivers do. And I don't know if that actually plays a role. I'm just saying it potentially could, right? Because he was fantastic in that area, no question. Rackability, 9.25. Like I said, it's tough to get a good angle on him to hit him. I know that there's occasionally times where he'll get blown up a little bit, but man, he's impressive after the catch as well. So, you know, if you're worried that he's going to get pressed to death at the line of scrimmage by these big, strong NFL corners, I mean, motion him the ball, use him like the Chiefs use Tyreek occasionally, where, you know, give him a jet sweep from time to time. Use him like the 49ers use Deebo Samuel, and have him flying around the field back and forth in the backfield and doing things like that. He's just so electric with the ball in his hands that, to me, you got to do anything you can to get it there, right? And, you know, if that means trying to cover up some of his weaknesses elsewhere, potential weaknesses even, because as you'll see in terms of the release, I didn't think he struggled nearly quite as bad as a lot of people were making it out to be, in all honesty. I know, yeah, he could struggle with press from time to time, but one thing that I really like that he did, in all honesty, and I know some coaches out there might not like this, but almost instantaneously, as soon as the cornerback sort of flashed his hands and, you know, was looking as though he wanted to get hands on, DeVonta would almost like take a step back, right? And, you know, that it might not be a good thing, but one thing that it does do now is it kind of opens the field a little bit more, right? I don't know how many people here are MMA fans, right? But when a strike is being thrown your way, there's only two real things that you can do, right? You can try and block it, in some capacity, whether it's a punch or a kick, or you can move, right? And instead of DeVonta, where he's trying to swat the press away with his hands and do all this stuff, he just moves a little bit, right? And then he goes. And now you're a little bit out of position as a cornerback. I feel like he did a very good job in that regard. And it kind of got some guys in college, in all honesty, where, if he's running a streak or any sort of vertical route, and now you're a little bit off balance with forward lean, and he has sort of this plyo step going on where now he can really push off that back foot and explode by you. There's some issues there, right? That caused some DBs some problems just in those games that I watched occasionally. And I felt like that was an interesting way to help cover up some of his weaknesses, right? Again, maybe I know a lot of coaches will talk about false stepping and you're wasting momentum, and I'll talk about that from time to time. Especially on the offensive line and defensive line by example. But as a wide receiver, I didn't necessarily hate that. The only problem is that kind of kills a little bit of time, right? So there is a downside to it. If they're dialing up a blitz, then you got to be a little bit concerned in that regard. But otherwise, it seemed like a decently effective way for him to sort of not only evade the press, but also potentially get the defensive back out of position. Will that work in the next level? Like I said, not 100% sure, but he did a solid job of defeating those sort of things at college. So I gave him a 7.75. Also because a lot of times when he was lined up in the slot, you're not really going to press him from there. There's just too many ways for him to go. That's just a dangerous game. You're not really going to get pressed from the slot very often. So if that's going to be where he plays a decent percent of his snaps, I think his release and various releases that he was using will continue to be effective, right? Then this next grade is going to have some people up in arms. Blocking and physicality. You just gave Jamar Chase a 3. How are you going to give DeVonta a 3, right? And I totally understand that might sound a little bit wild, but I just got done saying in the Chase video, which if you haven't watched, click the link above my head, that so much of those blocks are about just willingness. And even though he doesn't have the physicality to back it up, he is very willing to go throw a block, right? He is a feisty guy, and I really like that, right? And you could say that the effectiveness sometimes isn't there, right? Sometimes, even though he has a good angle on a safety, that safety just has to put his shoulder down and beat him, and that's entirely accurate, right? That did happen from time to time, but it's a lot better than a guy like Jamar taking a lazy angle and not really giving any effort at all, right? So I'll give him the same grade because Jamar plays a little bit more physical, when it comes to as a just pass catcher, but DeVonta likes to block now, or he at least likes to give effort blocking, and I'm going to reward that effort in all honesty. And then lastly, I gave him a 1.25 on size. If you guys want that to be a 0, that's entirely possible. Just adjust the grades slightly there. I don't think it should be a 0 because, like I said, at 6'1", his size does offer him the ability to do things like climb the ladder and go up and make a catch occasionally. It offers him the ability to, with that lighter frame, potentially have a little bit better body control than other guys that are heavier. And then athleticism, 4.5 out of 5. I docked him a little bit because I just don't see the strength, right? And, for you to be a 5 out of 5, I think there has to be some sort of fullness and overall balance to you. But when we're talking about speed, acceleration, when we're talking about quickness, when we're talking about just explosiveness, whether it's, like a vertical jump or broad jump, would have loved to know what his numbers were there. That sort of change of direction ability, that agility, all those sort of things, combine that into one. And you have a very athletic guy, right? Overall 83. And some people are going to hate that, but that has him as, to this point, my wide receiver 1. And obviously it's only been a 2-man race between him and Chase, but I have a little bit more confidence in him and his ability to get open just based off the other stuff than I did with Jamar, right? Jamar has a similarly freakishly athletic profile as well as some bigger size, but I just felt like DeVonta was significantly further along in his just sort of technical approach to the game, right? At the end of the day, I always talk about this, those one-on-one matchups, whether it's offensive tackle to defensive end, right? Whether it's tight end versus a linebacker, whether it's corner versus wide receiver, it's like a chess match, right? And let's say one play you run a slant. Well, the next play you're going to try and make it look like a slant, but you're actually running an out route. So that way the cornerback flips his hips and you can beat him outside. And now you get a reception, right? There's so much of that goes on. Whereas that cornerback now, he's going to, fake press you on one play and, make you think it's press, make you go outside when you were trying to get an inside release, right? There's so much stuff that goes into that battle on the edges. And I feel like a lot of people are sort of overlooking that a little bit with Jamar, and they'll say, oh, he was 19 when he played. Well, that's good and all, right? But we didn't see him play when he was 20. And we also don't know how far along he is in that process, right? We can clearly see development with DeVonta, right? We could see 2017 to 18 to 19 to 20 annual progression, right? And you can see it in his game. You can see it on film. You can see just an increased understanding of, hey, I want to attack this corner this way. I'm trying to get into his blind spot here. I'm trying to attack that zone that way, right? Oh, that guy's in a deep zone. That guy's in an underneath flat zone. I'm gonna do this and then break out here. So that way nobody really sees me and I'm wide open for a catch. Those sort of things, right? You're just significantly further along in his understanding, at least in my opinion, of the position. And no, the size isn't there. That's why the grade is so close. If the size was there, Smith would be my number one receiver by a significant margin, but it's not. So it's a concern, but I don't think it's that big of a concern to where size trumps everything else on this grade sheet. I really don't. I don't think that, just crossing out in red letters all those other grades and putting too small, I don't think that that does anything good or productive, because I think that, when you really look at some other players who've played the position, they might not have his exact measurements, but again, like I said, highly similar weight to height ratio as a guy like Robbie Anderson. You could look at a guy like Marvin Harrison, Deshaun Jackson, guys like that who were immensely successful in their own right to varying degrees. Obviously, Marvin being a Hall of Fame caliber guy, Deshaun being a pretty seasoned veteran at this point, and Robbie being a more so emerging younger guy. I think that everybody's had a little bit of success. I think DeVonta could certainly be next in line, and I think that based on the traits that he showed, there's really no reason that he shouldn't have success. Now, I was going to talk about this in a future video, but I don't want people to just look at this big board and go, oh, well, he thinks DeVonta Smith is just going to be better than Jamar Chase, right? And then if he's not, come back and say that I'm wrong, right? Because this is very theoretical, right? This is in an equal situation who I think has the greatest probability for success. And, if DeVonta Smith goes and gets paired up with Tua, by example, and Jamar Chase gets paired up somehow, say, with Pat Mahomes, right? Like, there's really no competition there in terms of, yeah, I think DeVonta, he has slightly better traits. Well, Jamar is in a significantly better situation, and there's the results, right? I mean, there's a chance that if Rashad Bateman goes in the 20s, that he's going to be this year's Justin Jefferson, who looks way better on tape next year. But did he really have better traits than CD or Judy or even Henry Ruggs? Probably not, or else he would have been taken higher than those guys, right? That's one thing that I hate about just presenting it in this way, is that I'm not saying that DeVonta Smith's automatically going to be better than Jamar. In fact, the grades are very tight, and a lot of the wide receiver position is dependent on what you have around you, right? So with that being said, obviously, all we can do is wait, right, to see where does he end up going? Does he get put into a good situation? Does a team draft him and, craft a rollout to him? Kind of, as I said, using him more so as that dynamic Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel type guy, or are they just going to put him out on the edge and say, hey, go try and be like Mike Evans? Because if they do the latter, I don't think he'll work out very well. If they do the former, I think that things will probably go significantly better than a lot of people expect. At least a lot better than what the, he's too small crowd, what they expect, right? I think he'll be significantly better than that if you put him in the right spot. So with that being said, that's all I really have for you guys today. If you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If you didn't, tell me why, right? Or if you did, tell me why. Or if you have any potential requests on future prospects that you want to hear me talk about and have me grade, drop them in the comment section down below. I know we're getting close to the draft, so no promises that I'll necessarily have them out beforehand, but worst case scenario, I'll pump out some more of these videos in the following days after, right? So hopefully you guys did enjoy. Hopefully, if you did enjoy and want to see more and continue to hear, oh, where do I have Waddle? Where do I have Bateman? Do I even have DeVonta as my number one overall wide receiver, right? Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. If you want to see, click that subscribe button so that way you're constantly in the loop with all my future uploads. And with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm mic'd up. Now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys.